It's art time!
Here we have a bunch of Warhammer 40,000 scumbags, also known as Orks. Now this is part of the art used on the first ever Orks boxed set RTB02, with RTB01 being the first plastic Space Marines boxed set, the beaky set that we all know and love. Now these were the first proper metal Orks released for Warhammer 40,000 alongside a few others. There were a couple of Space Orks released previously, but they were not for Warhammer 40,000 specifically, I think. Now back in the day, the Orks had no clans. There were no Bad Moons, the best clan, or Snakebites, the worst clan to speak of. They were just generic Orks. I guess a bit like freebooters maybe. Now these are the Orks that I feel wore the best outfits. Well, maybe the second plastic boxed set did. These were a close second. All these Orks are wearing those lovely quilted flak jackets. The texture on them looks really good. They're also really fun to paint. Amusingly, this look also makes them look a little bit like turtle shells on their shoulders. You never know, maybe they are turtle shells. I've always been a fan of the baseball cap and goggles combination that some of these Orks wear. I think the correct term is a forage cap. I don't know why it's called that, I'm sure some of you do. Also, some of the Orks are wearing aviators, and that's awesome. The muzzle flares look really nice in this piece, and the bullet trails are really fat. They look almost like laser weapons, and the others just have typical muzzle flashes. I wonder what that's about.
Now, Rogue Trader artwork always had really cool looking muzzle flash effects on the weapons. I think it's that sort of crescent shape they liked to use a lot of back then. It's bloody brilliant.
Hey you guys, check out what I've found. I've found a knife.
That was my best Goonies sloth impression. Now this Ork looks amazed he's found a knife. So much so, he really wants to show it to you. So I reckon that you guys know that what we're looking at here is an Ork, a very popular race in Warhammer 40,000. Now this Ork has a hat that you probably wouldn't find in Sports Direct. It's a very spiky hat. It looks like a hat that you might see in the war section of a museum with extra spikes stuck to the top of it. The Ork has chains attached to his clothes all over. I can't think of any functional reason for this, so I'm guessing it's just aesthetics. Is he based on a punk? Probably. The pistol the Ork is holding has to be in my top 10 weirdest Rogue Trader weapons of all time list. What on earth is going on there? The magazine is massive, and yet look at the handle. It's got a big ball on the end. It's very weird, but very Rogue Trader. It's great. Amusingly, in his other hand, he's carrying a knife, and yet if you look at the scabbard attached to his waist, it still has the knife in it. Maybe it's a second knife. Also, I don't think Gimli the dwarf will be very happy, as it seems our Ork has stolen his axe, and now has it hanging by his waist. Poor Gimli. Okay everybody, to tell you the truth, I really don't know how to begin with this one. It doesn't really look like much, does it? Well, looks can be deceiving. This is actually, believe it or not, a Catachan face eater. You've all heard of the Catachan devil, well this is an even more deadly Catachan species. Word on the street is that this thing attaches itself to your face and then melts it off. A nasty way to go indeed. I can't imagine it's very quick either. So which sounds worse to you? Your face falling victim to this, or a facehugger from Alien? It's a tough call, I think. Instead of looking like a creepy hand spider, like the facehugger, this just looks like a flannel or a hand towel. What's the difference between those two anyway? I would really like to see these things return to Warhammer 40,000, but I don't really see how they could. The miniatures wouldn't be very visually appealing, would they?
Now, when I saw Alien for the first time as a youngster, probably around 11 or 12 years old, I had nightmares about facehuggers and chest bursters for weeks and weeks after that. Probably months. I was terrified of that movie. It didn't stop me from wanting to watch the sequel though, which I did many times.
Power Extreme. Now this one reminds me of the Centurions. Remember those old toys and cartoons? They had little bits of armour and weapons that plugged into them. Quite similar to how the black carapace works actually. So this guardsman, I think it's a guardsman, has a very strange shaped helmet. It's got a sort of chin cut out, a bit like Magneto's. Built into the side of Magneto's helmet are what looked like a pair of 90s wireless headphones. I know, as I had a pair. I think my dog chewed them up though. They were fantastic. I think the kids have Beats by Dre nowadays, don't they? On the left hand side of the guardsman's chest is a really big circle. Is this supposed to be like the discs in Tron, or is it something else? It's a bit like those big birthday badges you get sometimes. Maybe it's his birthday. His other pad with the arrow telling us where it goes is totally different. Why is it asymmetrical like this? Did the guardsmen have shoulder pad options like this? I'm quite confused. I don't think they did. And we have here a trio of bloody awesome Space Marine chapters. The Blood Angels, Blood Drinkers, and the main men, the Crimson Fists. So first up, let's have a little look at the Blood Angel on display here. There's a few details I think are quite interesting. So this version of the Blood Angels logo is a little different to today's version. This version has much bigger wings and the blood drop is less prominent. The Blood Angel also has a silver left shoulder pad. This is seen on only a few pieces of art from this era and then vanishes. I wonder what that was all about. It would be a cool scheme to try if you wanted to make your Blood Angels a little different, I think. The Blood Angels logo itself is quite small. It doesn't take up the whole shoulder pad like it would nowadays. I can't think of a reason for this. Can you? Now the next chapter on show here in the middle there is a Blood Drinker, another blood themed chapter. The Blood Drinkers are like the Blood Angels, but better. They're so much cooler, if you will excuse my crude term. They look better, sound better, and probably act better. The Blood Drinkers' trim colour is yellow. You can see it on their helmet stripe and their shoulder studs. The miniatures sometimes had yellow pinstriping too, that looked really nice. Trust me, go and have a look. On his shoulder pad is an inscription that says Lust for Blood. Is that a play on the Iggy Pop song Lust for Life? It was an Iggy Pop song, wasn't it? I always thought the Blood Drinkers logo was really cool. Do they have the best logo in all of Warhammer 40,000? Well, that's up to you guys, but I think the Chalice thing is definitely up there. Last up on the podium is the Crimson Fists, one of my favourite chapters of Space Marines. The Crimson Fists, as I'm sure you're all aware, were the original poster boys of Warhammer 40,000. The original, and probably the best. The Blood Angels then came along after them, and then we got the Ultramarines, and they will not budge. Interestingly, the Crimson Fist's fist actually looks more like a red hand, as opposed to a glove or gauntlet. Maybe the gloves are proper skin tight and flexible. The Crimson Fist has some of the most common Rogue Trader era graffiti that you'll see on Space Marines. The phrase, kill, kill, kill. It's also spelt with only one L, the reasons of which are unknown.
Now sadly we don't see much of the old graffiti and slogans anymore, do we? Nowadays it's all just generic scroll work, and you can't even read what's been written, just black lines. Disgusting. Anyway, would you like to see a return of the graffiti and slogans? I know I would.
Welcome to Jurassic Park. Now, I'll never forget going to watch Jurassic Park with my mum and a couple of friends back in, 1992. It was bloody brilliant. I also had the SNES game, which wasn't quite as good. I did somehow, however, manage to finish it, which looking back was a hell of a feat, I think. After looking at this a bit longer, I think this is pretty much a cold one, isn't it? Is that the name of the dinosaur things the Dark Elves ride around on in Warhammer Fantasy? I think it is. So in Rogue Trader, this is known as a dinosaur. Apparently the dinosaur name applies to any giant lizard in the setting. The sort of thing Venkman was talking about in Ghostbusters 2 at the end of his chat show perhaps. So are these the same dinosaurs as what the Eldar Exodites are supposed to be riding around on? I'm sure they rode dinosaurs. Or was it turtles? Now, do you think we will ever get the Exodites in miniature form for Warhammer 40,000? I'm sure people ask for them all the time. I guess they would probably show up in Kill Team first, maybe as a squad of 3 dinosaur riders perhaps. I think they would be quite interesting. Eldar riding dinosaurs with lancers. A bit like that old game Joust, and I loved Joust as a kid. With the way things are currently being brought back to Warhammer 40,000 by Games Workshop, I think it's more of a case of when, not if now, with the Eldar Exodites. One of the most common matchups in early Warhammer 40,000 now. It's the Imperial Space Marines up against the filthy Space Orks. Yep, Space Orks. They had space in their name then. So the Ork, front and centre of this piece, is quite bulky, very stocky. His arms look quite short, maybe he's half squat. The Ork in the bottom left of the picture, or is that a goblin, looks like one of the goblins in the Labyrinth movie. One of the ones running around with the chickens, I think. Is that when they're throwing the baby about? You remind me of the babe.
What babe?
Babe with the power.
What power?
Power of voodoo.
Voodoo?
You do.
Do what?
Remind me of the babe. Now on the right hand side of the picture is what I think is supposed to be a Space Marine. He seems a bit wrong to me. I think it's the proportions again. So the Space Marine's backpack looks a bit on the small side. Less of a backpack and more of a rolled up yoga mat carried on his back. He also has the most massive hands and longest forearms I've ever seen on a Marine. Maybe they're bionic arms. Hey, doesn't that Blood Angels Heresy character have 2 bionic arms? Maybe it's him. What's his name again? Zephin? Now this time, it looks like the Orks might have the upper hand, which is normal for Rogue Trader art. The Space Marines are usually having their arses handed to them. The Marines always losing created an interesting mood. It really helped to convey the dark side of the galaxy of the Warhammer 40,000 setting. Just from a few pieces of art, we can tell it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and it's wonderfully evocative.
I find the battle scenes featuring Marines today are a little more ambiguous. The Marines nowadays are usually always holding their own, as it were. The situations look a lot less desperate than they used to. Well, there are a few exceptions, I feel. There's a few good pieces of artwork where the Marines are getting hammered. Not drunk hammered, beaten. I suppose they sort of have to upsell the hero element these days, because no one wants to buy the people who are losing all the time. Now, regarding losing all the time, if you're enjoying this video, then please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. That means you, Henry. If you are enjoying the content here on the channel, then please consider joining us on Patreon, the link to which is in the description below, or up here somewhere.
Ramirez. Here we have the Kurgan, having a cheeky fag while he's waiting for the bus. I usually see a few of these guys down the road from me on the evenings at the weekend. So I've mentioned in other art videos that the Mohawk seems to be a very popular haircut in the Rogue Trader era. Well, this time it's a little different. It's like a tri-hawk but short. Maybe it was some form of punishment. Oh well, it'll grow back. Now, if this hairstyle does have a name, and there are some hairdressing experts out there, then please let us all know what it is. This guy has a belt on with an interesting logo. It's like a stylized A. Someone once told me this is an old band logo, but I can't say I know which. I'm sure there's someone out there who does recognise it though. The man's hands don't look quite right. I'm starting to think perhaps this guy is a mutant. He's got big, long, fat witch's fingers with massive knuckles. I don't know what's going on there. Now, speaking of mutants, there's a sign behind him saying no mutants, which might be the whole point. He's sort of protesting against it by being a mutant sitting next to the sign. What do you guys think? There's also a trappy, cagey thing hanging from a tree, a bit like the one Mad Martigan is in Willow. This one also has something in it. Is it another person? Is it a mutant? I feel like I can see a load of tangled flesh. It's a little hard to make out. There's also a signpost there, a wanted sign. I can't make out the picture. It looks like a dog. I wonder what the dog did. Pissed up an Arbite's leg, I imagine. Also, people don't like the way I pronounce it Adeptus Arbites rather than Arbites. But Arbites sounds awful, so I refuse to change.
I love that old artwork. If you want to see some more old artwork, then check out the playlist up here somewhere. And as always, thank you very much for watching.